I hope you all are fed and hydrated and not too tired from today because this discussion is, I think, highly relevant to pretty much everyone in this room. I'd like to take a moment to name the reality of what we're living through today. So, your social media timeline these days might look something like a children's school in Iran bombed, horrible news from the Epstein files, violent ICE raids, relentless layoffs, AI anxiety. I mean, the trauma of living through this kind of turmoil and the constant exposure to this kind of distress has created a sense of perpetual dread that we can't just sideline when we show up to work, especially at a time where job security is at an all time low. There's a very real feeling of burnout that I'm sure most of you are feeling. So, knowing this, how do we realistically navigate these concerns and limit our exposure as we move through our day to day at work without disconnecting from reality? So, joining us for this conversation is our wonderful group of panelists who I will ask to introduce themselves, starting with Dr. Laura.
Hello, everyone. It's so great to be here. I am a workplace psychologist. I've been at it for 25 years, specializing in psychology to make work and lives better. Work life is a big part of human lives, and there's a long way to go to make it healthier and a better place for humans to thrive.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bennett Porter. I'm the Chief of Staff at Calm, the app. So I don't know if anybody uses Calm
Raise
here.
your hand if you use
Thank
Calm.
you.
Woo!
Thank you. Hopefully you've been listening to Matthew McConaughey put you to sleep. But we're here to help people on every step of their mental health journey. Really been focused on workplaces over the past 4 years. And I'm excited to talk with you about that subject more.
And hi, everyone. I'm Ruchika Malhotra. I am a former business journalist, workplace culture strategist, and the author of 3 books. My latest is called Uncompete, Rejecting Competition to Unlock Success. Really thrilled to be here.
Thank you all. So, Dr. Laura, I wanted to start with a question for you, which is from a psychologist perspective, what is the impact that chronic exposure to stressful scenarios and doom scrolling is actually doing to our brains and our cognitive system?
So, the constant bad news. So the media often is bad news, dramatic. Everything is burning around us. And there's a lot of that. The world is a tricky place right now. And then social media tends to be the comparison effect, always comparing yourself against others and feeling like things are going better for someone else than yourself. And what it does is it puts us in a state of fear, and we're scared. We're living in the future. We're living in a state of anxiety versus a state of the present day awareness, which Calm is a wonderful help with. So I think it raises our cortisol, it raises our fear, and it makes us less intelligent. We're less able to think through things logically and reasonably, and we're more reactive, short-fused, impatient.
And how does that constant cognitive load make it harder for people to focus, make decisions, and simply kind of function day to day, especially when we're all still expected to perform at work?
Well, it's not like the TV show Severance, right? We're not a different person when we walk into the office. We carry those same cognitive loads with us into the office. I would say probably a generation ago, right, that you were expected to check that stuff at the door. Nowadays, people will not refuse to because they know it's not good for their mental health. It's not possible to. And so you carry all of that in, plus all of the stress and anxiety that you feel at work. And so now it's a matter of how do we as managers, as coworkers, as leaders, as part of the C-suite, help people with this cognitive load to get their job done and make their life better. Because we have to realize, right, that there is a cost to businesses that actually don't take care of their employees in this way. And it can't be an afterthought. It can't be thought of as a nice to have. It needs to be up there. Mental health needs to be up there just as much as physical health. It shouldn't be seen as a bolt-on, but a necessary driver of actual performance. I think the World Health Organization said that today $1 trillion is lost in productivity right now because of depression and anxiety. It's going to be $6 trillion by 2030. So this is
6
something
trillion.
6 with a T. And so that's why we all have to pay attention to it. It isn't a nice to have. If you care about your bottom line and you care about your employees, you should be making mental health a priority.
Well said, Ruchika.
Yeah, I
Yes,
mean,
please.
Yeah, and I have to say, like, this is the first time I'm meeting Bennett, but I have such a deep love for Calm because 4.5 years ago, Calm approached me when my last book was coming out, which is Inclusion in the Workplace, and Calm for Business was like, would you record a session on your book? And I was like, for like a meditation app, I mean, like, I could understand, but I was like, really, for an organization, for a company to have that foresight on how, like, equity and inclusion was so important to create workplaces where people literally feel calm, and the importance of that from a business standpoint, that foresight obviously, hopefully, has really paid off, you know.
And it really started during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So for us, I'll talk about, like, before the pandemic, we saw people spending 10 minutes a session, and it was mostly both men and women in their 30s and 40s that would spend 10 minutes with the app. After the pandemic, we had a huge upswing in young people. And then they said, I need to be fixed in 90 seconds. I'll give you 90 seconds. I'll give you 60 seconds. And what they were looking for, and we had to adjust our content. So we had to adjust our content to things. It's like, I'm about to step into a meeting. I need a 60-second reset. By the way, I can't wear earbuds at work, so I can't listen to anything. Make it haptic feedback so it'll help me center and calm down. So you can see that, you know, every generation is going to have different needs, and you have to meet people where they are. But it is not thinking about things in like more of like your traditional yoga, let me go sit on a lavender pillow. It is really about centering yourself. And when we had talked before, I had given a quick tip. So here's a quick piece of advice for everybody, which is if you're in the office and people are like, I'm in New York City, I can't think about anything but like having a coffee and bagels. But here's the thing. You can, every hour, make sure, and Dr. Laura will back me up on this, is to take a walk, look out a window, or grab a cup of water. Just do those 3 things. Every hour, if you can do those 3 things, walk, water, window, you'll be better off at work.
100%.
And the walk could be around the block, or it could be around the office. It doesn't have to be a long walk. It's just the little things that matter. And mental health is like dental health. You gotta take care of your mental health more than once a day, like you would your teeth. And if you don't take care of your teeth, you know the problems it leads to. It needs to be a habit.
And I think somebody mentioned just the way different generations show up at the workforce. And a question for you, Dr. Laura, is that, you know, when stress becomes widespread across the workforce, it can shift from individual burnout to kind of a systemic burnout. So the CEO is burned out, which means the leadership team is burned out, which means it's trickling down to, you know, people on different teams. I mean, what does organization burnout look like, and how do, I guess, the differences between boundaries and expectations that different generations have, like, how does that show up? Sorry if that's a loaded question.
That's about 4 or 5 questions. Burnout is an individual response to being chronically overloaded and facing chronic uncertainties and stressors at work. And there's a number of things that cause burnout. But in the human, it's a feeling of utter exhaustion, a feeling that they lose their confidence, and they become cynical. So that's what burnout looks like, and we can have it happen across many people in an organization. If it's a culture where people continue to hustle without breaks, and humans are like rechargeable batteries, They're not machines that can be go, go, go and no recharge. So the challenge is taking the time to recharge. But the bigger challenge is workplaces need to do better at eradicating the causes of burnout, which is chronic overload, not enough resourcing, toxic leadership, which is my latest book. I wish I'd quit sooner. I'm a toxic leadership researcher, and I did a session on that book today. But it's about creating great leaders who bring out the best in their people.
Can you share a little bit about toxic leadership? Like, what does that mean? And so often you hear this saying that people usually leave a bad manager, not a bad job. Like, what is the root cause of this issue if we know that somebody in a company is causing like issues for many other people?
Well, I mean, toxic leaders cause chronic harm. Their harmful behaviors hurt people's engagement, productivity, and well-being. And they need to be not hired and promoted, but when they are there, they need to be let go and dealt with swiftly. And organizations are not doing a good job of that. And it's about hiring the right people into leadership, training them, giving them the resources so that they can help people thrive and not basically kill people through burnout.
And, at the same time that all of this is happening, Ruchika, the traditional dynamics of work haven't necessarily changed. And I want to talk a little bit about what you cover in your book, Uncompete. You write about how competitive workplace culture is one of the driving culprits behind burnout and exhaustion. I mean, can you talk about how that dynamic shows up in times like this?
Yeah, I mean, actually very much related to what Dr. Laura talked about. One of the big challenges we have today is there's this idea that if you're not always on, I just literally got off a flight from Seattle. I very much look at the West Coast culture as well, the tech culture, which I've had experience in. There's this rise of 996, right? Like you work 9 hours a day, 6 days, 6 days a week. It's really, really like if we don't engage in this race to AI, if we don't engage in this competition to be the best organization, you're going to lose out. And everyone is feeling the effects of that from like right at the leadership all the way, to every level of the organization. And as a result, I think a lot of toxic norms continue to proliferate. It definitely impacts women, people of color, people from other marginalized identities even more. And I think the most important thing, and I can imagine, all of you here on this will back me up. The data is very clear. Like a bubble bath or like a short vacation or whatever it is isn't going to fix chronic burnout, right? Like at the end of the day, you need a manager or you need a team that'll say, like, I've got your back. I can see you are heading towards burnout. Let me help you prioritize. Let me help take things off your plate. Let's talk about where we are. And the reality is we're not there. In fact, with digital technology, again, with the sort of where does AI fit into this? Will I have my job or not? It's become even worse. And that's why I think this is where taking that sort of like, I want to be a leader and a manager who does things differently. I'm sure we can all think of working with leaders and managers and team members who really had our backs and how differently our nervous systems felt in those moments versus when you're like, oh my gosh, like my company, they're going to fire me, or like AI is going to replace me, or, I'm back at home, like I have family members in Iran, or I have family members in, wherever it is. And I'm so stressed, but I have to come in and put on this mask to be accepted here. I think there's so much good data to show like that's just not sustainable.
I've had the privilege to go in and work with Fortune 500 companies like I'm sure you guys have and listen. And one of the things that was really interesting was that one of the executives said, are we just soft? Like, are we just, like, why, right? Have you heard this too?
All the time.
All the time. We're just this new generation is so soft. It wasn't like this for me. Like, I had to work all the time.
Speaking of generational difference.
And so...
I hustled and I had a partner at home taking care of everything.
Right. And so I asked, I said, okay, so when you were coming up, right, working on Wall Street, did you have a desktop or a laptop? Or did you not have a computer? Oh, it started, yeah, we just had the papers and, back and forth. Okay, so, but I got a computer. Okay, your computer, did you take it on the train back to Connecticut with you? No, okay, all right, so you had that time. your laptop. Did you take it home? No, we weren't allowed to take it home. We couldn't use, okay. So then you still had your commute time to decompress. Today, employees do not have that luxury of a commute, of an unplug. Those things used to be built into our system. And nowadays, you're asking people, exactly like you've said, to stay on 24/7, 7 days a week, 996, and you're burning people out. They don't have the luxury that you took for granted, and their world is different because of this phone in their pocket. And so you've got to recognize that and counterbalance that with something else. And some boundaries is something that we absolutely should ask for.
And we have to stop judging other generations, right? Every generation has its own challenges. The younger generation had a bloody pandemic when they were trying to go through school years. And they grew up with the constant comparison of social media. And, I mean, they have their own challenges. And, yeah, they may be more susceptible to certain types of stress and anxiety, but they've had certain conditions around them. So we need to be more empathetic and take the gifts of each generation, because that generation gets things done in a heck of a hurry with their technology skills. I have 3 teenagers. I know that. They're awesome at tech.
Now, Ruchika, you mentioned something that I want to circle back on. And as you were talking, I was reflecting on how, you know, when we give advice about how to navigate certain stressors in the workplace, it's not always universal, right? So a lot of, you know, what we might be sharing could be relevant to like a corporate environment. But what about someone who works in healthcare or they're a frontline worker? I mean, there's like a nursing shortage right now. And if, you know, all the nurses are going to take care of their mental health as they should, where does that leave the patients? I mean, how do we even begin to touch upon this?
Yeah, such a tricky question. And actually, the pandemic and studying the patterns during the pandemic, especially from an equity and inclusion lens, was really important and fascinating, right? Like during the pandemic, mothers with young children, disproportionately women of color, disproportionately Black women, had the highest cases of reported burnout and mental health and anxiety challenges. So we know that if you don't take an intersectional lens, you're definitely going to let people out. I want to add about the fact that, like, I know a lot of nurses as dear friends. It's such a challenging profession, such a high needs profession, and one that really doesn't pay even close to commensurate. And I think of this all the time. You know, I think of this like, what does it take to be someone who can work from home because we'd have the technology versus someone who like literally cannot work from home? How do you caregive, right? And again, I think the biggest, and some of the research that I cite in the book is specifically around looking at the stress monitors of nurses, like what their heart rate is like on a typical day at work versus their stress levels when they're off work. And there's such a clear spike of how going into work can be so stressful. I wish I had a great answer about how to, I mean, if I did, like, I'd be, you know, I'd be like traveling the world talking about it. I don't have a great answer. The few organizations I work with that are specifically in healthcare are very, very determined in finding ways to make sure that especially frontline workers like nurses are given, you know, that time off, are given, you know, space in their schedule to make sure that they're not overwhelmed all the time. But again, you know, there's so many people who are, there's so many nurses I speak with who are saying, like, especially at a time where there's also a lot of health misinformation, there's suddenly a huge rise in, you know, in diseases and chronic illnesses that we thought had gone away are now coming back. So I mean, it feels like a perfect storm, and there's no great answer, at least not one that I found yet.
Oh, that's well said, and I really appreciate your transparency here, because I think it touches on the crux of a many-faced problem, which is that there's a universal experience that we're all sharing, but then it affects people differently. You mentioned like women, people of color. I mean, Black women have left the workforce in droves over the last few years. How do you help people whose identities or families are directly being impacted? And I'm curious to hear from all of you, like, are there any actions or initiatives that you've seen workspaces taking where, you know, there isn't really a universal way to approach it, but are business leaders kind of tailoring anything to kind of really hit home how they can support employees?
The one thing that I've seen work exceedingly well, not with any specific people, but for a team or employee base, is transparency and leadership. So if you ask, and it's super uncomfortable for a lot of leaders, but if we ask them to model the behavior of talking about their mental health challenges, I'm not having a good day today, being upfront with I used to have panic attacks and this is how I deal with it. There was a chief legal officer who was actually battling breast cancer and didn't tell her team. And they were having performance issues because they just felt like she wasn't showing up for them. Once she was vulnerable and shared that, it modeled the behavior and it made it okay for their employees to actually share with their teammates and feel like they could bring their whole self to work. So one of the most effective things I've seen is for leaders to really embrace it and model that vulnerability, but also be sincere about it. Because if anything, people can sniff out, right, when it's like, you didn't really, need to share that. But if you can be vulnerable, I think it goes a long way with teams and building trust in the culture that you want. That's a high performance culture and a safe space.
Exactly, and it's the leaders that show compassion. And whenever I ask people, what's the best leader you ever worked for in your whole life, even in a school capacity, a team, or in the business world, and list the words to describe them, it's always about they were there for me, they supported me, they believed in me, they cared for me. It's all about care and compassion, and we need more of that. And I'm also a huge advocate for flexibility. I've been speaking on that for 20 years. The idea, do we all have to drive in, sit at a desk every day, all day, in order to have a great culture? And I'm seeing that trend of pulling all butts back to seats, and I stand up against it 20 years later because the data all says the same thing. The right answer is a hybrid model and flexibility in a lot of cases.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to talk about two interventions that I've advised on that have, one has shown like long-term good data and the other one is kind of new in terms of interventions I've introduced to clients. So the first one is understanding what psychological safety really means. It means amazing research from Dr. Amy Edmondson at Harvard Business School around how even in very high-stakes situations like the neonatal ICU, the NICU, when everyone has psychological safety, i.e. they feel like they can take risks, they can challenge the status quo, respectfully, they can fail even, but still be accepted. So they'll speak up if they see something going wrong. There have been changes in terms of life and death in the NICU when there's psychological safety within the hospital setting and teams. So helping some of my clients understand like why psychological safety is really important. Speaking of that vulnerability that leaders can model, and others then feel like safe to say like, actually, I'm battling, depression, or I have anxiety, or here's how I'm navigating different things is really important. So psychological safety, and that's sort of long-standing research by Dr. Edmondson. The sort of newer interventions that I've been talking about is work from Dr. Sandra Dalton-Smith, who is a physician, and she has come up with this incredible proprietary framework called the 7 types of rest. And essentially, her work as a doctor has found, as I think many of us can probably agree with, and that sleep isn't the only type of rest we need in today's world to really, really recover and feel like we can be part of an organization and like we can belong, right? So she talks about 7 types of rest, including sensory rest, right? Like detox from our devices, social media, emotional rest, boundaries, things like that. Spiritual rest, right? It doesn't have to mean prayer or going to, an organized religion, but it's about really like, how can I take care of my spirit, right? So physical rest, 7 types of rest. And so already being able to go to organizations and say, like, actually, it's not just saying to your folks, like, oh, go take a vacation or, like, go take a nap. It's really, like, how do you holistically incorporate rest into your work?
That's exciting.
I mean, that concept of psychological safety is so important in so many respects, right? Not just in the workplace. And I'm curious if, if you can just illustrate, and anyone can take this, like, what does the absence of psychological safety look like in a work environment? Please.
I'm a toxic workplace researcher. The opposite of it is a place where people walk on eggshells. They're fearful of losing their job, getting reprimanded. They're not thinking creatively. They're just thinking reactively. They're not at their best, and it's affecting their sleep. Their anxiety's high, and people are often in states of conflict when that happens. There's conflict amongst the team, and there's toxic competition versus collaboration, which I know you talk about a lot. So that would be that type of environment. And we've all experienced them in some time in our career, I bet.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up, I think what a lot of people might want to know is how to stay functional without pretending that the world around us doesn't exist, that the world isn't burning. I mean, I'd love to hear from each of you in a kind of rapid fire format. Like, what are one or two practical habits or leadership practices that can help people navigate this moment in a healthy way?
Acknowledge it, but then detox from it. So I think media detox periods are really important, and then having the daily gratitude practice for, despite all of this, I'm grateful for A, B, and C in my life, like being at this beautiful venue right now.
Sleep. Get some sleep. I think if there's one thing, try to get some sleep. And one way to improve that is don't let your phone be the last thing that you look at before you get to sleep, and don't let it be the first thing you do when you wake up. Go brush your teeth, get your cup of coffee, all of that goodness, but get a good night's sleep.
Guilty of the first thing in the morning, especially this morning at 5:30 a.m. getting on the flight here. For me, apart from these, is group chats. So I have a group chat where it's like, oh my gosh, like the world is on fire. Like, how do we deal? Let's talk about what's happening, and then let's talk about, like, love is blind, So having just I think being in community gathering, whether that's over online, because so many people I know live everywhere, or outside of where I live in Seattle, or it could be gathering in person, making time. Supper clubs, meals. I'm from Singapore. Food is a big part of my life. So gathering people for food, getting together, processing together is very much part of this too.
Excellent. Well said, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Thank you all so much.